Uh, and let me
Bullseye.
yeah, I was just setting up the stream message thing. Okay. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back. I'm your host, Dylan Charisma, here as always. Not bringing you guys Paladins content this time. Thank God, right? No. Anyway, so it's been so long since I've actually made a dedicated stream on YouTube. Very specifically, in regards to my main channel. You know, I'm much more active on my card game channel, Card Master Phoenix. But this is very important to me. I apparently had started a stream one time somewhere in the past month or so where I reminisced about my childhood, and I don't really remember exactly what I talked about because, as I said, I don't really watch my own content. There have been a few times where I glance over certain parts of my videos just to relive a funny moment for a quick chuckle, or maybe, I think there was one or two instances total throughout my 4 years, I believe it was. Let me see. I started, it was what, 2016? 2016, 2017. No, I believe it was 2016. So around about 5 years now. And I would just, watch the video start to finish and sort of see my overall thoughts about the video itself. Kind of, see if my points were well illustrated, kind of review, kind of just in general, what I was saying, how I was saying it, see if I was stuttering, you know, a fair bit, which is absolutely something I used to do a lot. Yeah, there's another thing that I used to do, and still to this day do a lot. I call it my filler words. My filler words just meaning, mm, stuff like that. Where I'd say a variation of or something like that, and it would just kind of be dragged out for a few seconds to help me link it into my next thought in the sentence, right? But anyway, uh, one thing I tend to do a lot, and this is very off-putting to people who don't maybe spend that much time with me, maybe they're not very familiar with me. Um, Another, reason it's very hard for me to make and especially maintain relationships is I just, everybody, I do believe talking kind of out loud to yourself is, I wouldn't say normal. It's still a little unorthodox, but I believe it's to a point where it's more commonplace than maybe people would like to admit it is. And I first off want to preface this by saying I don't think that you should be embarrassed at all. Um, It's kind of like when you're reading out loud. There's been scientific studies proving that reading out loud helps, uh, what's the word? Um, Not certify, but solidify. Yeah. Really solidify what you're reading and take it into account, and just enhances a few different things, which will be a subject for another stream. But I really think it's a shame how reading as a pastime has just fallen completely by the wayside. Um, but again, I'm getting into like way too many things here. I'm already 6 minutes in. Well, five, because I spent the first minute setting this up. But anyway, uh, so today's Memory Monday topic. Yes, it's on Sunday, but Sunday night, Monday morning. Actually, probably is Monday by now. 2 minutes off, whatever. TKD, Taekwondo. Uh, so when first, I guess I will stall out a little bit longer, just kind of explaining the process behind Memory Monday. Um, every Monday or Sunday night, late Sunday night, I will make a stream whenever. I don't want to say necessarily by convenience, because that sounds kind of like this is just something I do for fun, which I mean it really is. It's not. It's absolutely not a job. It's more of a hobby, if anything. Although I'd make the argument it's more of a outlet, right? Sort of, because I did want to start my channel off as something to entertain, but if I'm being completely honest with myself, and I do believe I've said this before, it was mainly an outlet to channel my depression, to help alleviate that at times, right? But anyway, basically Memory Monday, whenever I remember or can find a good topic, I will just go back and reminisce about something from my childhood, from my youth. Like, for example, in this instance, it would be TKD, which is where I went. Well, I mean, it kind of gets into the story, but, um, next week will probably be, God, yeah, I guess next week will be Noah's Ark, because that is a story and a half or two. Yeah, that's gonna be a long one. But anyway, so first off, I went to school at Bonnie K Elementary, and I still remember the day I first went into Bonnie K, kind of previewing it, walking the grounds. And I remember, and the one thing that really stands out about Bonnie K as an elementary school, or just school in general, is the walls are not just brick walls. They're very, and you'd have to be there to understand what I'm about to say, but they're very artistic. They are completely painted with this kind of childish, friendly vibe, but also very well illustrated. Um, if you're familiar with what's it called? Magic Tree House, I believe it's called, was the main children's book series that people, at least when I was a kid, read for fun. Because I mean, go figure. But when I was a kid, reading was actually kind of popular. It maybe wasn't, you know, everywhere. It was kind of something people did more so by preference still, but people would often carry books with them to read, either in homeroom. Well, I mean, in elementary school it wasn't called homeroom, but um, you know, sometimes at recess. But anyway, actually, that will be another good topic, is what I did at recess, because I think that would be interesting, an interesting story to a lot of you who listen, because did not play on the playground at recess. I did my own thing, which is an interesting story I feel is very unique to me. But anyway, um, so yeah, there's these pictures of bobcats because Bobcat is the mascot for the school, and just in general, the school is the walls are very decorated. They're beautiful. They've got nice stylistic art on them. Again, childly, like trees, tree houses, hammocks, bobcats, jungles, kind of just different. Again, it is really hard to sort of convey exactly what it looked like. You would just have to be there and walk the halls yourself to really understand what I'm saying. But it was absolutely nothing like the standard schools that you'd go to where it's just solid brick walls. It was much more elegant to look at than that. Um, but anyway, after school, of course, lets out, which, you know, at at your earliest age of elementary school, you'd get off at like 2:45, and then at middle school it's like 3:45, and then like 4:45 for high school, or something like that. But anyway, um, so after school lets out, well, I guess I should say in the process of school letting out, they would call car riders first. No, let me see. Yeah, bus riders would be first, then car riders, then what they just called others. So if you had a extra, not, I'm just gonna call it extracurricular, but it's not really extracurricular, if that makes sense. Um, TKD obviously was that because it's extracurricular. It's something that you did after school, but it wasn't like a car ride where you'd go home. It wasn't a bus rider thing, obviously. There was this long, 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 almost like a breezeway towards the entrance of the school, and they would line you up and sit you down. You'd kind of just sit down wherever, but it was somewhat organized, and you would just kind of sit there, waiting for your ride home or to wherever you went. But something that a lot of people did was just sit with their friends because they didn't really care if you like once they wanted you to be organized at first, but after that they didn't really care if you moved a little bit to get with your friends or wherever. Of course, I just kind of did my own thing. I was kind of I don't want to say I necessarily made a point to isolate myself, but I did make sure I was usually a little ways off from the majority of people, and then eventually people would get on me for that because I was too far away from everybody else. So I would do this cute little thing where I would scoot up like closer to everybody, but then as soon as like they turned their head or whatever, or I walked off to the next group, I would kind of slowly scooch my way back slowly, like literally centimeters at a time, to where it would to where it would look inconspicuous, right? It's like because the standard because to most people they're not gonna realize if I'm a centimeter out of position from where I was last, right? But I would slowly just scooch over every few. It must have been every few minutes. I went so glacially slow. Um, it really is kind of humorous thinking back at it now how much trouble I used to go through, how many hoops I'd hop through just to kind of isolate myself. Um, it's really silly, but if if you were in my head, you would if you were living my life in my shoes at that point in time, or just in general, you would understand exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, um, we're 15 minutes in now. Let's get to the meat and potatoes. So anyway, I went to Taekwondo, um, martial arts, but it was so much more than just Taekwondo. Most people hear Taekwondo, they think karate practice, but it was a literal haven, for me at least. I remember I actually cried the first time I was touring that place with my mother because I didn't want to do anything after school. I just wanted to go home. But of course, both my parents had jobs that required them usually to work well into the afternoon. So it was kind of unfeasible for them to stop and drop what they were doing to come pick me up, run me home. So they had to find an after school program for me to attend. And TKD kind of filled that void. Um, Looking back, and this is something I'll get into in about a minute or so here when I really start developing these thoughts, but looking back, I really don't think there was any other program out there that would have given me the experiences Taekwondo did. And again, a part of that just is because it's so much more than just a deceptively simple looking Taekwondo. But anyway, there'd be this crusty old blue van, like with visible rust and stuff on it. It looked absolutely atrocious. You'd be sat in there with like 2 dozen other people, because there's like 6 to 10 seats, 6 to 10 rows of seats on both the left and right side. Of course, they didn't have seat belts, just like a bus. They didn't have seat belts, so you just sat there, laid your backpack kind of at your feet or whatever, and you could just kind of open the windows if you wanted to. You could talk with whoever you were next to. They didn't really care where you sat down. It wasn't like assigned seating or anything. You could sit with your buddies and talk. Um, what I usually did was I would sit down and shout outs to the the early 2000s kids if you remember this, but I would pull out my iPod and I would just listen to very specifically Owl City replay by Izaz, I think his name is, the artist name. Um, Owl City, Fireflies, Hot Air Balloons, stuff like that. Um, I actually probably will make another stream where remember Monday where I will go over my ride to school routine because that's another story I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing just because of how unique it is. But anyway, stay at the focus. Stay focused on the task at hand, right? Topic at hand. Um, and while I was doing that, sometimes I would pull out my DS uh, and I would just play like Mario Kart. And one thing with Mario Kart, the DS games, they didn't actually require Wi-Fi, which thinking back on it now is actually kind of miraculous, right? Because you think of everything that requires an internet connection now, and it just seems boggling that you know you could play anything without an internet connection, like especially a handheld device like the Nintendo DS. Someone I always hung out with named Eden brought a Game Boy Color, which is basically a more dated version of the DS. The pixelated Pokemon games. Anyway, but I remember one thing you could do with the early Mario Kart games is you could create a specific room, like server, where you could invite other people to race with you, like actual other players that had a DS that had Mario Kart and entered that code. So there would be one guy that I would always race, and he was kind of like my rival in Mario Kart, Chad Exaros, and Recess will be its own thing, I promise. But Chad Exaros was a fellow. Um, I remember, I don't really know why I did this, but I actually had my own song for him, if that makes sense. Where I this is ridiculous. Where I go, Chad Ixaros, he's the most Ixaros in the world. Uh, uh, it was terrible. I don't know what was wrong with me. Oh God, I was such a mentally damaged kid. I have no idea. Um, you would see me and you would think I was cute, but oh man, I was just a mess. Wow. I, uh, and there is a pretty grand deal of embarrassment here. Me just sharing these stories, I can feel my face being kind of flustered. But anyway, um, and he was just, and he really was the quintessential rival character in an anime, right? He was just objectively better than me at Mario Kart in literally every sense of the imagination. Whether we did actual races, balloon battle, there was a third version. There was a third mini game you could do where you would kind of try to race around the track and get gold stars through hoops or whatever. Um, and that was something I liked to do. That was probably my favorite of the three of them. My second favorite was balloon battle. Um, Another game series that I really loved as a kid was Mario Party series, and of course it ended up going spreading out, branching out to like the Wii, the Wii U. But when I was a kid, it was really just the DS games, and the DS game Mario Party games were so different from the more modern ones that are available on the Wii and especially the Wii U. It's almost not even the same franchise. I mean, obviously it is, but it's not even the same game. It's really not. If you have never played a Mario Party DS game, I heavily recommend it. It is just, I mean, maybe I'm just attributing more value to it than maybe is necessary, but or is deserved even, but it was just such it was it really was such a blast. Anyway, um so, that's kind of what I did on the way from getting picked up by a Taekwondo karate van on the way to the actual location where, everything was. And we would get there and you'd get unloaded from the van, you'd grab your stuff, you'd get in the actual dojo, I'm just gonna call it. It's not what it really was, but I mean, you know, for the sake of simplicity and because it's karate themed, we'll just call it a dojo. The very first thing you would do is you would take off your shoes and put them in a special. They had this big green box, cubby holes, basically. Uh, I believe that anybody who attended elementary school knows what a cubby hole is, where it's just a million small boxes for you to hang your backpack, for you to place small items in. But these were very, very small squares. Like there'd be probably, I mean, there was a ton. Um, there was probably like several dozen, several dozen cubby holes. And what you do is you take your shoes off and you place them in the cubby holes. Now, again, it was not assigned cubby holes. But boy, I sure acted like it. um, First off, I almost always placed my shoes in the exact same cubby hole. It was kind of my way of like marking my territory. This was my cubby hole. I remember one time, some guy had gotten in before me. His name was Owen Young, and he had placed his shoes in my cubby hole where I always place my shoes. So what I did is I took his shoes. He wore like chacos. So I tossed them out. I'm such an awful kid. No, I actually really was an angel. I mean, look how that turned out. But you know, I really was a fantastic child, and I'm not saying that to brag. I mean, I will give myself shit at any opportunity I can. But the one piece of credit I always afford myself is I really was an incredibly well behaved kid. I was probably your favorite kid if I was in your class, just because I just never acted up. Um, you know, I was just kind of, I was just well behaved. I was a really well behaved kid. Anyway, but I took Owen's shoes, or I think it did happen a few times, but specifically this one instance I'm remembering, Owen specifically had his chacos in my cubbyhole. So I took them and I'm like, ah, what's this? So I took it, I dug my hands in his cubbyhole, and I literally threw his chacos behind behind my shoulders, and I put my I put my Crocs in there, and then Owen, and then I think one of them like hit Owen on his heel, and he turns around and he's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "That's my cubby hole. You can't put them there. That's mine." And he's like, "Dude, what are you talking about? Nobody owns any of the cubby holes. I mean, I guess technically they're the property of the programs. Like Mr. Smart and Master Hargus's cubby holes, but I mean, you don't own them. I'm like, no, and I grabbed I grabbed his hand and I like walked him over to the cubby hole and I pointed at it. And this one is mine. This is my cubby hole. You can't have it. Um. Oh Jesus. Oh well. This is mine. You can't have it. Oh God, it wasn't even a big deal. Oh man, I can't even imagine what that must have been like to the outside world. But anyway, um, so anyway, so eventually he realized he was not winning this battle, so he's just like, okay, dude, I'm sorry, and he put his shoes in a different cubby hole, and he just walked off. And I was like, and I crossed my arms, so I was like, anyway, so I just kind of, uh, yeah, that was that. Um, Another thing I would tend to do is whenever I didn't have that one exact cubby hole I would put them in, is I would see where every God, this is so I was such a weird kid. What the hell's wrong with me? But I would intentionally wait, like just sit there with my shoes off. Well, they weren't shoes; they were Crocs. But I would wait to see where everybody placed theirs, and then I would place mine on a completely isolated cubbyhole, like completely isolated. So if everybody's shoes was in, because usually everybody just put their shoes next to each other's, right? So if the top three rows was filled with shoes, I'll place mine on like the fifth row in the middle, which must have looked so weird because you see like a completely organized line, and then you just see this one random cubbyhole with two Crocs in them. And that was, and I'm not sure if it was necessarily because I didn't like the idea of my shoes being close to other people's. And it wasn't like an ownership thing. It wasn't. It was more like kind of the social anxiety aspect of it. Like I didn't want to be near other people, and my shoes being in close proximity to other people's cubby holes was a part of that. But I think a part of it was also, if I'm being honest with myself, just because I really, really, really was serious about that's my cubby hole. You don't mess with it. And so it did start off as that one cubby hole, but eventually it sort of I kind of expanded my territories. I conquered other cubbyholes. And then, and so, and so it started off as just that one cubbyhole. But then, but then as time went on, I ended up, I guess, taking over more in my conquest to gain infinite power as a monarch, as sovereign ruler of cubbyholes. So I had like my own specific column. This 9 by 9 this 9 by 9 grid of cubbyholes is my property. You can't have them. You can't have them in them. And if I tried putting them in there, I would just do that thing just told you I did, where I'd take them and I'd throw them out, and I'd grab them, I'd bring them to the cubbyholes, and I'd say, "This is my cubbyhole. You can't put them there." Oh God, it was so crazy. Oh. And then man, and over the course of like a year or two, I must have made everybody, like every single person, just knew this 9 by 9 grade of cubby holes was mine. You didn't put your shoes in there, and because they would just rather give it to me. They would just rather let me have this than actually make a fight of it, because it's not a big damn deal, dude. It's a cubby hole, you know. Like they're just sitting there looking at like, why does this damn kid care so much, you know? So it's just like, whatever, fine, I'll place it in another cubby hole. I liked it. I liked having them company with my friends' shoes, anyways. Whatever. I'll just place them next to Charles's Skechers, you know. It's whatever. Um. Anyway. So, Jesus, that was like 10 minutes just on the cubbyhole story. But anyway, so after you put your shoes up, you would just have free time. Okay, you just play. They had this huge box of toys, and Eden Hensley and I, we would play, um, kind of make believe with little figures they had. They weren't actually like action figures; they were just different things. And we would choose different ones each time. We were both very imaginative, I would say, and um, we would kind of, I guess, put ourselves in the situation of those toys, right? And we'd pretend like we were those toys. Those were like our quote unquote avatars, so to speak. And we would, uh, I remember it kind of became a canonical storyline where we would build upon the same exact story or series of events every single day, which was actually really, it was really something. It was kind of special, actually. Um, for a few different reasons, we've kind of, I wouldn't say we're necessarily um, against each other, so to speak, but we've kind of mutually agreed to to not to not really have dealings with each other. I would say Eden and I. Um, but as kids, we were really tight knit. Um, kind of like kind of. I mean, um, yeah. I guess it would be kind. I guess Eden was effectively my after school Prince Westfield. But anyway, after that, um, after you would, and there really isn't that much to tell to this specific section of the story. We really would just take action figures and just kind of play make believe with them. Um, I will say before I get into the next part of the after school program, one time, this only happened once, but oh, and there's another thing too, but I'll get to that. Um, I don't really remember how it came up, but Eden approached me one time and she's like, "Hey, dude, there's there's this there's this idea I have for I forget what we called it, but I'm just going to say the game we played, which was of course the canonical storyline thing." And I was like, "I have this crazy brand new idea and I think you will love it, but I don't want to tell you here out in the open," which wasn't really even out in the open. It was we kind of went off to our own corner to do it because we kind of get the stank eye from other people, just kind of looking like weirdos, right? But anyway, she's like, "So follow me into the bathroom and I will tell you about it." And so she started walking off, and I was kind of hesitant, right? Because on one hand, I was a fairly gullible child, as all children tend to be, but um, it. I mean, this was this is what we did together. We played that game together, and she told me if she was a salesperson, she made that sale 100%. She gotten my money's worth. So I was like, "Hey, Eden, wait up." Um, and I tried to just get her to stand still for a moment so we could talk kind of by ourselves because I didn't really want to go in the bathroom. Eden, not, I don't think this really matters, but I guess I'll just throw it out there. Eden was what we would call a tomboy. She was a girl that was heavily into boy things. Her favorite band was Kiss. Um, she I'm not sure I would say she did a lot of boyish things per se, but she was very far from the path of just your girly girl type of thing. Like she didn't play with dolls or anything. She didn't paint her fingernails. She didn't really do anything that most girls typically do at that kind of young age. Um, but anyway, um, so of course, being a girl, she would use the woman's bathroom, the girls' bathroom. But, you know, part of me being a really well behaved kid that always followed the rules is I knew that was the girls' bathroom. If I wanted to go in the bathroom, I used the boys' bathroom. So, this kind of put me in a bit of a situation where I was either going to have to just deal with not knowing whatever this crazy new idea was that she had pitched to me, that for some reason she just refused to share with me right then and there. I think actually it wasn't quite so random. I believe she did kind of uh, describe it as it would be like a secret meeting in, in the girls' bathroom. Um, for the sake of eliminating suspense, I did end up going in the women's bathroom. Now, at this time, there weren't actually really that many people around. I think we actually both went in there without anybody noticing, um, which was actually kind of lucky to be honest, because without a doubt it would have not been good. It wouldn't we wouldn't have gotten very far. I remember at one point, well, I mean, just the entire time, honestly, I was in the girls' bathroom, and I will say, just for the like two people out there that are curious about the difference, there is none. Men's bathroom, women's bathroom, the exact same. And I can tell you this with 100% certainty, both from my memories of the women's and men's bathroom in there. I work at Food City. One of the things that I do there, well, technically I'm a night stalker, but and we'll get into that later. But one of the first things I do is, well, last things I do, sorry, rather, is I change out the garbage bags, and part of that means that I, yes, go into the women's bathroom to take out the women's garbage bag in that trash bag and refill it with a new one, right? Replace it with a new one. And I will tell you, there is no difference. There's two stalls in the men's bathroom. There's two stalls in the women's bathroom. There's two urinals in the men's bathroom. There's two urinals in the women's bathroom. There's a sink in the men's bathroom. There's a sink in the women's bathroom. Hand towel dispenser thing slash air dryer, air hand dryer thing. Men's bathroom, same in the women's bathroom. There is no difference. It's only, and I understand, okay, I understand why it's segregated like that. Because obviously it would be, I suppose at a base concept level, you could make bathrooms gender neutral. But I do think that it is much better that we have bathrooms segregated by gender, just because that does eliminate the, even if it is just an incredibly minuscule chance, I'm sure there are people who would kind of take advantage of that. So I do think that maybe, although not entirely necessary, I think it's for the better that it's like that, right? And as kids, nobody's, that's kind of a mindset you develop as an early teenager, that kind of pervy instinct. But just in general, it's just better off that it is the way that it is. And now it's, of course, with all these years having gone by, it's been completely normalized. It's just the standard, right? Um, but again, getting back to the story, I was just racked with worry and concern. I was like, why, Eden, we shouldn't be doing this. Um, the whole time she was having to fight me from just running out the door because I was just feeling awful. There was probably visible sweat coming from my forehead because I knew this wasn't something we should be doing. I was really, I really was just, I guess it was because I was such a good kid, but I was really not happy with the situation. Not upset, just like, full of concern. So I remember one time I opened the door, just creaked it open a little bit, and and I remember how it happened too. I was like, Eden, we shouldn't be doing this. I can't do this. And she's like, okay, look, fine. Creak open the door. If it will calm you down, creak open the door. That way you can act like you're going out. That way I can finish telling you and we can both move out. Okay? And we can both get out of here. Okay? I'm like, okay, fine. So I creak the door open and there just so happens to be a line of people. And one of the girls there, her name was, I believe, Renee or something like that. It was, um, it wasn't exactly Renee, but it was something like that. She had a ponytail and she was blonde haired, but, she was like, oh, and she had a foot cast and she walked over all the way to Miss Martin, who was at the time at the cubby holes. And I remember I just stood there kind of watching this because I knew exactly what was going to happen. And it played out like a prophecy. I watched her go, and I just stood right outside the women's bathroom's door. Watched her walk all the way to Miss Martin. Get Miss Martin's attention. Talk to her, and I saw her point at the women's bathroom / at me. And they both walked all the way back. And so I ran into the women's bathroom again. And I was like, Eden, Miss Martin's coming. We are like meat. We are potatoes. We are squashed tomatoes. We are not going to survive this. I didn't actually say it like that, but I was freaking out because, again, part of me being such a good kid is I could not mentally handle the concept of being in trouble because I was just like, oh my God, I'm a bad person. I'm a criminal. I'm horrible now. Which of course it wasn't a big deal, but to me it was because misbehaving even slightly was. I mean, you gotta understand. I was raised believing stupid was a swear word. Okay, SpongeBob was forbidden. Um, so these were things that was like sins for me, right? So I was just panicking. I was like, Eden, what are we going to do? And so she spends the time, and of course the door is closed behind us again, and uh, I start breaking down crying, and Eden's trying to calm me down. She really was a great friend, and Miss Martin inevitably starts knocking on the door, and she was like, "Let me in." Well, no, that's kind of a man's voice, but but anyway, and so she opened the door, and oh my God, I was so pathetic. I was just kind of cowering behind Eden, tapping my fingertips together, because I knew we were just absolutely ground turkey. Ground turkey. Oh man, it was not going to be pretty. And so before she even says anything, Miss Martin that is, or Eden, I'm like, I know, I'm sorry, it was terrible, I shouldn't have done it, but I just wanted to hear the idea. And Miss Martin raises an eyebrow, and and Eden just sighs and puts her hand over her face, and then Miss Martin's like, come here, and so she brings us to the office, um, sits us both down, and I am in tears. I am bawling like a baby. And Eden, I guess, being slightly more troublesome of a kid than me, at least by comparison, she had kind of, I mean, she knew she was in trouble, but she didn't, I guess, take it so much to heart like I did. Um, but I had genuinely felt bad because I knew I did wrong. Um, and one thing that Miss Martin would do, she really is an amazingly sweet, kind, gentle person. But when you did get on her bad side, you did not want to be there. I remember she was maybe even a bit more frustrated than she should have been. She was like, "Shut up!" Like, which, to be fair, I mean, like it was a little harsh, but to be like, because she's talking to an 8-year-old that's crying and mentally destroyed, but decrepit. But to be fair, I mean, it must have been pretty annoying, you know. So eventually, I kind of just, I kind of just make myself I did kind of what I call crying hiccups, where when you're crying, you go, you know. Um, and so I was just kind of listening to her speak, and she just puts her hands out. She's like, "Why?" And I remember she very specifically looked in my direction, and she asked, "You know, blank, you're a good kid. Why? Why would you do this? I mean, you're so well behaved. Why would you choose to do something like this?" And so I just laid it all out there. I was like, "Well, Miss Martin," and of course I was crying and still doing stuff like this the whole time. I was like, eat, and I gave her the entire background of it too, because that's something I do is I give full context, right? I don't leave anything to the imagination. So I told her the whole story of how Eden and I have this whole game that we play, after school, and there's like a continuous building storyline to it, and she's just shaking her head, nodding along, and then I'm like, and so Eden told me she had this crazy new idea for the story, and that uh, it was going to be super cool, and that I'd love to hear it, but it was going to be a secret meeting that we had to have somewhere private. And I knew we shouldn't have done it. I tried telling her to stop, but but she went in the bathroom, and I know it was awful, and it was so bad for me to do it, but I just wanted to hear it so desperately. I guess I just couldn't help myself. And she hears all this, and she knows I wouldn't lie about this because I went into such detail about it. It's one of those things. It's like you couldn't possibly even you would you would not you would not fabricate this much detail if it wasn't the truth. And also, I believe she just knew I was that good of a kid. So she was like, so she just kind of sized it off, and she's like, look, it's not really that big of a deal. You absolutely can't ever do it again. But from what you're telling me, I can see how it happened. It was a little silly. Don't ever do it again. But, you know, I think you're making a bit bigger of a deal out of this than it needs to be. And so, kind of, I guess, to help calm me down, she takes out this big reward box. Well, not big. It's a small box, like a shoe box, and it's full of toys and various assorted, you know, figures and stuff. Which occasionally she would, anybody who is super good and well behaved would occasionally get, maybe like once a month, everybody would get something out of that toy box, and it was theirs. They could keep it, bring it home. It was their toy from there on. And um, I remember very specifically the item I chose was a Yu-Gi-Oh card. It was um, Swords of Concealing Light, I believe, was the name of it. I know exactly what it looks like. It's Swords of Revealing Light, only it's like super dark, and it's got a skull coming on overlooking the swords. Um, and I just thought it looked, I just thought it looked kind of whatever, not necessarily cool, but it just the artwork, I guess, encapsulated me. It sort of engrossed me into it. It was a nice piece of art to look at, but also it was a playing card, and I liked making magic trick shows for my mom whenever the few times I would get to kind of play with her when she wasn't doing schoolwork or anything at home. And so, because I had a magician's set and stuff, so I figured I'd use that in one of my routines. And that was kind of that. Um, we did sit in what I will call the timeout corner for ease of explaining what exactly it was. Basically, we both just sat on chairs outside the office for like 15 minutes, and then she was like, "Okay, you both learned your lesson. You can go." And we went back to playing. And then shortly after that, it was time for karate practice, which of course is what we were there for, really. Um, so just to quickly recap, you would get on the van, you'd get loaded onto the van, you'd get loaded off the van after you drove there, after they drove there, and you'd put your shoes in the cubby hole. You'd go just play around, screw around, do whatever you wanted to. You could buy snacks if you wanted to with like they had their own kind of everybody had their own card with a set amount of money on it that your parents would pay, like say $25 on your card, and cookies were like $2, or Cheetos was like $1.50, water was like 50 cents, 25 cents, something like that. Um, and you could buy snacks, right? Um, If you have a pool membership, you probably you kind of know what this is like, right? What I'm talking about. Um, so you could go eat snacks, you could go play just with the toy box or just anything you had with you in general until it was time to start like karate practice. In which case you would go line up and you change into your gi, you would do your belt, all that stuff. Um, Specifically, I always had trouble with tying the belt because I had to use Velcro all my life because my stupid ass never learned how to tie knots really. Um, I could do it. The problem is I always did it way too tight, so I would give myself blisters because I tied it way too tight on my feet. So that's how the Velcro came about. And I'd always go to Miss Martin and Mr. Harkis and have them do it for me. Um, you'd start off doing various exercises, warm up exercises, which I think is very responsible. Knowing that, there's about to be a physically intensive workout session. So it's only natural that you start off warming up, preparing your body for like easing it into gradually more physically strenuous activity. You do the cat stretch where you'd uh, put your you'd kind of lay on all fours. You'd lay your hands out in front of you, your feet out completely stretched out behind you, and the goal would be to have your toes touch the back of your head. And there would be a few people who would always excel at this. I could never do it, so most people would just get their toes kind of about halfway to touching their back. I have no idea how some people are so flexible they got to touching the back of their heads with it, but whatever. If you, That was just kind of how people showed off back then, at least in karate class. They did the splits, the jumping jacks, push-ups, sit-ups, stuff like that. Um, of course, you'd have your own gear bag of headpiece, two knee pads, two gloves, two um, foot pads, a mouthpiece, and a mouthpiece box that it rested in. And then there's a pouch on the other side. One was for your belt, the other was just for whatever, like snacks, I guess, is what most people put in them. But anyway, um, yeah. So um, after that, you get the actual training itself. Um, Everybody would just kind of practice the same technique, and the 2 to 3 training instructors, depending on how many were there at the time, would walk around surveying the room, seeing if anybody needed help, helping us improve the technique itself. After that, we would uh, have a specific technique that we would run and train against one of those huge water bags, training bag things. Um, so that was one thing. Other than that, um, you would kind of you just kind of do whatever they told you to do, and that was that. Um, One thing I will say that I really liked personally, my favorite part of of karate class was there was always, they always followed the same exact list of events in the same exact order. Okay, and I liked having that routine to it because something about being on the spectrum is you like having a routine and you really don't like deviating from it. Um, Basically, everybody more or less knew exactly what was going on and they knew what to expect. But as I said, my favorite part of karate class was the exhibition matches. They would line you up. There'd probably be about, I guess it was about a dozen people, rows of people, one facing south, the other north. You'd face each other, you'd bow, you'd touch gloves, you'd begin. And everybody was super laid back about it, you know. Nobody took it too seriously, except for me. Um, I treated each and every single sparring match like it was a graded performance because I always aimed to not only please but impress. Um, so one thing that they really stressed when we were doing the exhibition matches is the seesaw aspect, as they called it. The seesaw aspect was you would take turn being the aggressor, then it would be your opponent's turn to be the aggressor, and you would defend. Because it's mixed martial arts. You would both attack and defend in the same session, and this would go anywhere between 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how the fight, I guess I'll call it, played out. Also, just the time on the round itself, various other factors. But I was really bad at that because I just liked being the I just liked being the aggressor. I didn't really like defending too much. Um, Also, I wouldn't say necessarily say a dirty fighter, but I would probably do moves I shouldn't be doing. Like when somebody would do a spinning kick, I would, in the middle of them doing the rotation to kick me, I would go and trip. I would trip them. Um, I would trip. I would trip them while they were doing the spinning part of the spin kick, so that they would fall. And then, of course, I would, put out my hands to help them back up. But I just took it way more seriously than it needed to be. Um, and then I would just like full on Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, just like punching montage, like where he'd do like 20 punches in a row, one after the other consecutively. That was basically me, in the exhibition matches. And then after you finish that first match, you'd go down the line because, of course, like I said, it's two rows of people, and you just keep on going. You'd probably do this six, maybe even upwards of a dozen times. And at the very end of the line was one of the three training instructors. There was Malik, there is Mistress Martin, and there was Master Hargis. And those are the three, like, I call them training instructors, but they really were the people running the operation. Um, they obviously didn't, they didn't take it, they didn't really, they didn't take it seriously because, of course, you gotta understand, they're Malik was in his mid 20s, and the other two were in their mid 40s, going up against 8-year-olds. Like the oldest people they go up against is was middle schoolers. So obviously they're not really going to actually take it like an actual fight, right? Um, so what they would do, and I really, really liked this aspect of it. But what they would do is they would intentionally hold back and not even attack at all. Well, I mean, they did attack, but that was just to grade your defense. Um, but they would kind of they would do that thing, if you've seen those Jackie Chan karate movies, where they would take their thumb and two fingers, their first two fingers, and do the like "come at me, bro" gesture. You know what I'm talking about. And one thing that they really stressed is they didn't want you making the same attack over and over because that's both uncreative, unoriginal, but more importantly, that's not very pleasing to look at from a outsider's perspective. If you're watching a fight between two people in, say, like a fight scene in a movie, you don't want to see just generic punches over and over. You don't want to see the same left hook. You want to see kicks. You want to see punches. You want to see spin kicks. You want to see hammerheads. You want to see a mix of attacks, right? That makes it look visually pleasing. That's kind of like you want to use different colors when you're making a painting. Um, and of course, there was like style points to it. So to impress, I would do spin kicks. I would do butterfly kicks. I would do semi rotations. It was a super weird technique. You'd have to be there to understand what it was. Um, but like I said, they would never really attack. They would kind of let you be the aggressor the whole time and see how you performed. Every now and again, they would very heavily telegraph an attack. Like they would hold out a fist behind like at their side. They take three very slow snail paced steps up to you, and then very slowly, like in slow mo, act like they were going to punch you. Um, and then, of course, the whole point was you would block it, or I mean, more cases than not, just duck under it and start attacking them again because it was comically slow. If you got hit by it, it was entirely your own fault. Um, what I did, and this was just me being stupid, but one thing that I always look for in a fight scene, be it anime, be it a movie, I don't like fights being one-sided. I just don't. It's not fun to watch. So I guess this is so stupid. It really is. But I guess to be a good showsman is I would intentionally let Mistress Martin, Master Hargis, or Trainsman Malik intentionally hit me with one of their super slow glacial attacks. And I would act like it actually hurt me. Like I would intentionally fall over and I'd be like, ah, you got me. And I'd stand back up and it's like, okay, my turn. And then I'd start going on. Man, I was so stupid as a kid. But anyway, um, this was something I would do. And of course, they would grade you on it. They wouldn't be harsh about it. If you made a mistake, which I mean I did probably about half the time, they was very very nice about it. One thing that I always loved about Mistress Martin and Master Hargis is they had this very specific way of correcting people. Uh, they called it the layer or sandwich technique, where you positive reinforcement, right? You would start off by saying something that you liked what they did. Then you would very gently and subtly lay in the criticism, and then again sandwich it with another compliment. So, for example, one thing that I always struggled with was my form. Okay, so Mistress Martin and I would be having an exhibition match, like going down the line, and my form would be a little sloppy. So she would stop me and she would say, "Now, hey, I really like the way that you're relentlessly attacking. That's very good. However, I think it would be really fantastic if maybe you made sure that you were leaning back into your punches. That way, there's a nice arc to it. But again, I really like how relentless you're being. Great job." And see what that does is it lets you know that you are doing something wrong. They're being very polite about it, but they're both starting and finishing it with a compliment to sandwich it in. That way you don't really feel bad about messing up, right? And that's one thing that just it's so simple. It's like saying how are you doing when you're meeting someone for the first time, or how can I help you? It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but to me at least, it was such a huge part of that. Is whenever you messed up, they were so nice about critiquing you. Master Hargis, something he would do, and again, it was mainly my form. He'd be like, "Hey, um, I have to say, I really like how you've been mixing up your moves. Awesome job. If I may, I would really love if you could maybe aim for the waist and above this time instead of just specifically trying to trip me down. But again, you've been doing really awesome mixing up the attacks. Great job, dude. Stuff like that. And it was just such a good thing. Um, I'm sorry, I know I have really taken my time going into deep detail with this. But after that, they would kind of just spend 5 or so minutes grading each person on their performance. And there was what was I call the awards ceremony. It wasn't really an awards ceremony, but basically they would call out a few people out of the few dozen. There'd probably be about 50 of us, I would say, in the after school program. And they would say, hey, Samantha, you did a great job leaning into your defenses this time. You did a great job, Charles. Good job stretching and really going the extra mile, keeping a positive attitude. Great job. And they kind of like pull you aside and commend you for that. And then after that, they dismissed you. And so at this point, two very interesting things happened. Um, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying about Taekwondo being so much more than just Taekwondo karate practice. It really was a safe haven for me. You could either, because of course, training would be over, you'd undress, you'd change from your gi back into your regular school clothes or whatever you wore beforehand, and then you could go back to free time. But if you wanted to, they would host special karate themed mini games. So one example is there was Cops and Robbers. Oh my god, I loved Cops and Robbers. So if you've never actually played Cops and Robbers, basically our version of it was there's two teams, Cops and Robbers. If it was kind of like tag. If you've ever played freeze tag, that's basically what most of the rules are like. If you get touched, instead of standing still, you have to go to the specified zone with cones. Okay, cones would mark kind of the in jail spot, but you could not move from the in jail spot. But if you were on the cops team or the robbers team, you could make a run to the jail zone, high five somebody in jail, and everybody in jail would go back to that team. So, for example, say I'm on the cops team and I get captured. If Eden runs up, gets past everybody, and touches my hand, not just me, but everybody in that in the robbers jail gets to go back to the cops side and can play again. So it was a very back and forth game, and I loved it. It was fantastic. There was also another one called Human Chess, where everybody was chess pieces, and two people would be the like actual players, as it were. I didn't really like that game because I never played chess really, so I never understood it. So I would always move to the wrong side, or I would move incorrectly for the piece I was. I would always forget which piece I was. Um, but one thing that was really cool about human chess is rather than actually capturing a piece, so for example, say two people, two chess pieces, though of course people, were to capture each other. They would actually have an exhibition match to help hone their skills, and everybody would watch and kind of cheer them on, whoever they wanted to win, right? So that was really cool because again, it goes back to it's a game, but at the same time, you're furthering your knowledge of karate, you're honing and practicing your skills. It's really great, and I can't sell just how much I loved that. And then of course there was dodgeball. Well, I mean not dodgeball. It was they had like these little what are they like they're like sports balls, but they're filled with like not even pocket sand, like literal they're like filled with stuffing, and you throw it at somebody. If you hit them, they were out, and you would go until there was only one person or only one team was standing. But if you caught the ball, the person who threw it was out, and you stayed in, and then you also got the ball, of course, to throw at somebody. So that was really cool. That was probably my favorite. No, no, I like Cops and Robbers more. Cops and Robbers was awesome. You seriously, I mean, it takes probably half a dozen. No, no, you probably need about a dozen. But if you are one time at like a party and you have like, or maybe you are on a football team and you finish a game before you guys go home for the night, seriously, break your team up into two teams of six. Play Cops and Robbers. It is so fun. It really is so fun. Um, but anyway, that's so that is the first thing that you could do. But if you didn't, for some reason, want to play any of those games, they didn't make you. What you could do is you could go to the back and they had PlayStations, they had GameCubes, they had TVs to watch whatever you wanted to watch. Um, they had a when I say they had a radio, like music box thing, it wasn't really like a radio. It was just one of those things where you'd put in a disc, a tape or whatever, you'd close the thing and you'd play it. But you could choose what you wanted to do. You could also go back to the snack concession room and buy more snacks with the money on your card. You could go back to the main lobby and play with just the toys they had or toys you had in your own possession. You could just kind of do whatever you wanted. It was very free form like that. Um, I will say that because both my parents were so heavily involved in their job, my mom was a school teacher and my father is the owner of his own company. So of course they both would stay super late. Probably about 7 o'clock would be the time mom would pick me up. So I'd be one of the last people that would get picked up to go home. Um, but that was actually kind of cool because that meant that I always had time on the PlayStation. And the PlayStation, they had stuff like Star Wars Battlefront, they had stuff like Tekken, they had stuff like not Street Fighter, what's that other one? It's not Tekken. There's Tekken, Soul Calibur. Tekken and Soul Calibur. I always played as Yoshimitsu because I thought he was just the funniest guy. Like always doing the pogo dancing on his sword or whatever, sitting on his sword. He was just a blast for me. I know one guy, Michael Knowles, would always play. What was his name? King, the jaguar-headed fighter. There was one guy who always played Huarong, which, if you've never played that game, he just does like 5 million kicks in a row. One dude played Paul, which is just a blonde-haired guy who has like a kind of like a mullet, if that makes sense. Again, it really was a blast. If you do have children and you're looking to enroll them, you're in the Tennessee area, really, Taekwondo International, such a great place. I cannot like I will genuinely be enrolling my kids there when I guess uh down the line because it's so much more than just karate practice. It really is. And I think that's really invaluable because people look at the logo, they say, oh, it's karate practice. But it really is like, it's free time, it's snack time, it's playtime, it's learn how to defend yourself. It's, really further your relationships with your friends and kind of, in a way, extended family there. Um, And of course, I guess going back to karate practice itself, you could earn promotions. So like you'd be white belt. God, I forget the exact order. Okay, hang on. I actually have the rack of belts that I earned because when you earned a belt, you would keep it. So, being currently, I'm a third degree black belt second. Okay, so what that means is I'm a third degree black belt with 3 gold bars, but I also am 2 degrees out of 3 to becoming a fourth degree black belt. So, so let me see. Okay, hang on. White, blue, yellow, orange, which wasn't always there, um, brown, and then purple, and then I think it was silver. I'm not really sure. I would have to actually go look at my belt rack to check because I have, of course, in my sparring bag, I have the belt rack with all the different belts in ascending order that I've earned on my way there. And of course, they have multiple pieces of different colored duct tape saying, oh, you're a white belt second degree, you're a yellow belt third degree, you're a purple belt first degree, you know? And you would eventually get stars on your belt too if you did really good in that belt. So, for example, as I said, I'm a third degree black belt, second degree. So I'm a third degree black belt with 3 gold bars, but I also have I have 3 stars on my belt. 2 are gold and 1 is kind of translucent, if that makes sense. Um, which is kind of like a half star. You haven't really earned the full star yet, but you're really putting effort in, is basically how I explain it. But one thing that was super cool, and this was so incredible, whenever you earned black belt, it was a real milestone because as soon as you earned your black belt, they could no longer call people, everybody else there, including the instructors, would no longer refer to you by your name. They would call you Mr. or Mrs. and then your last name. So, for example, they wouldn't call me by my name. Everybody, and they were serious about this. You could not, like, if you called somebody their first name and they were a black belt or above, like, they would get on you about it. Like, and this was so cool. So, for example, once I earned my black belt, I was no longer just my first name. I was Mr. Williams. I would no longer refer to her as Eden. It would be Mrs. Henley, you know, stuff like that. And it was so cool because not only because it in one way it was kind of like this status symbol, right? Like you've earned your wings, right? You put in all this effort and now it's paying off. Everybody's showing you respect because you've earned it, right? That's really cool. But more than that, it's not even just the people. And again, like I said, it was enforced. Everybody would, the instructors would make sure everybody referred to you by your title. You couldn't, that way they couldn't game the system by just calling you your name when they weren't looking. So that was really cool. But also the fact that the instructors as well called you by that title just really, it really furthers it into me as kind of they, as your instructors, still respect you enough to call you the title that you fought so hard and spent so much time there to earn. So it's like you really do, not only have you earned your rank, but you get respected accordingly, and that's amazing. Um, technically, and I don't want to waste too much of you guys' time, but I've personally been offered a position as a training instructor probably about 4 times, 4 or 5 times I've been offered, but I've intentionally declined respectfully, of course, I've declined every single time because I personally enjoy the experience of being a student more than I feel I would being a teacher. Now, that's not to say that's going to be the case forever. Eventually, I probably will end up taking them up on it and being a training instructor because I think it would be really cool to teach people like the next generation of young aspiring martial artists how to get better at that, right? I think that would be cool. But for now, I really want to get as far as I can. I am the third closest to being the highest rank out of everybody that's ever attended Taekwondo, that specific division of it, right? So, of course, there's Mr. Martin and Master Hargis. There's Instructor Malik, who I already have surpassed in rank, but of course I still defer to him because I'm just technically, by choice, still the student and he's the instructor. So there's kind of a disparity in power there. But, it's fine. We're all like, we all kid around. We're all friends and all that. Another thing, that would happen is Taekwondo was also like a summer was also like a summer vacation spot. So you know, you'd bring your kids and drop them off during the summer, and they treated you like it was summertime. You know, they let you kind of play all day. There was no karate practice, so you spent the whole day doing whatever you wanted to. There was movies, there was snacks. They would let you go outside, and you would have a huge water gun fight. Everybody would have a water gun. Like I said, there was like 50 people, so it'd be a 50-person battle royale water gun fight. It was just crazy. And you'd get friends, and you could team up, and you could just make alliances, and it was just crazy. It was like actual Call of Duty lobbies with water guns. It was crazy. Um, they would take you to the pool, they'd take us to movies. It was so incredible. I cannot begin to stress how much I love Taekwondo. Not only out of respect for how well they treated me growing up, and of course my fond childhood memories contained therein, but also just as a outstanding after school and summer care program. It was just fantastic. They would hold midnight events where you would stay up all the way through the night until like 3 in the morning watching movies, playing games. One game that they played that I absolutely loved was Jump, Duck, Evade. Jump, Duck, and Evade. So one guy, this would usually be Mistress Martin's son, Mr. Martin. He would take what's known as a blocker, which is just a big stick with foam wrapped around it, and it has a blocker, like a little cloth thing on it, right? And you would say jump, duck, or evade, and you'd have to jump, duck, or evade, obviously. And they would go around in a circle because it'd be like 12 students and one person using who's the executioner, we'll call them, who says jump, duck, or evade, and then you do it. So, for example, if you said jump, you would swing at their feet, and that would tell you to jump. If you said duck, you'd swing it at their head, they would duck, and if you got hit, you just sat down. And then eventually everybody would get knocked out and you would restart. But the cool thing is it got tricky because after the first few rounds, they would no longer tell you what you were doing. So for example, the first 3 rounds they'd be jump, duck, evade. But eventually on round like 4 or 5, they would just swing at your head. They would just swing at your feet. They would just swing at your side. And you had to like quickly react to what was happening, which is really cool because not only was it a super fun game, but like I said, it was honing your reaction time. It was making you react and anticipate what they were doing before it even happened. So that was really cool. Um, I actually have my own blocker at home, and sometimes I will play Jump, Duck, and Evade with my brother, just because it's a blast in the past. It's really fun. Um, I think you actually can just buy a blocker. Just type in the Google or eBay blocker or like martial arts blocker, and you can find one, I'm sure. Um, but yeah, like I said, it's an amazing, just probably my favorite childhood memory, I would say. Um, really, it's been fantastic. That being said, I feel I've wasted you guys' time enough at an hour and a half in. But yeah, like I said, absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic place. If you're a parent now and you have kids, you're in the Tennessee area, please, 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 please take your kids there and enroll them. The first month is actually completely free, 100% free. You don't pay them a penny. And if you like it, you can enroll. Of course, there is a small charge, monthly charge. So like I said, the first month is absolutely free, and then and you decide whether or not you like it. If not, no problem. You can drop out. They're not going to pressure you into it or anything. But then you can also choose to pay that monthly fee and enroll there. Anyway, like I said, I feel like I've wasted everyone's time enough. Thank you for giving me the time you have. It's been very generous, however long you've watched. A second, a minute, an hour. Thank you all so much for watching. I have been your host, Dual Charisma, signing out. See you guys next time. Have a good one. Thanks for tuning in.